And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Susan Jane, who had an out-of-body experience, and then almost 1 year later to the day, she had a near-death experience. Susan, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here, Jeff.
Well, we're excited to have you. And if you don't mind, let's go in order and start with your out-of-body experience first.
Certainly. Well, I have to put a little bit of a warning. The out-of-body experience was because of a very horrific experience that I had. So I was on the Gold Coast. I was walking home. I'd been 2 states away on holidays. I was 19 years old. I was with my younger sister, and she had headed off to the unit before me. So I was heading back, and we were due to go home in a couple of days' time. So I was feeling a little bit down and just shuffling along the road on the way home. And I got a tap on the shoulder. And as I turned around, I was punched in the face and obviously hit the deck, hit the concrete. And I didn't come to until I was being dragged into the back of a car by my hair. Now, when I talk about this, it was a pack rape, so it was a pretty horrific experience. And the only reason I talk about it nowadays is because I didn't understand what was going on. I never talked to anyone about it. I never talked to anyone, a counsellor, a family member, nobody. I didn't understand what was happening until 10 or 15 years later that I got an understanding of this. And at the same time, I got the understanding of the NDE as well. So I called this an out-of-body experience because I was in the back of the car being attacked. And when I refer to this, I refer to my body as her or she. Now, it didn't feel like me. It looked like me. It didn't feel like me. But what had happened was I was in the back of a car, and I remember thinking to myself, I can't stop them doing what they're going to do, what they're doing to me. There's no way I can stop them. I tried fighting, and all that did was create more bruising. So I stopped fighting. And I thought to myself, how can I stop them doing this to anyone else? If I can't stop them doing it to me, how can I stop them doing this going forward for anyone else? And I remember thinking this and thinking it out loud to myself. And all of a sudden, I was out of my body. I didn't know I was out of my body. I was outside the car looking in the attack. And this is where I go she or her, because it didn't make sense to me. I was outside the car watching. Now, when I'd left my body, I also left all those 5 senses that we have. Seeing, I wasn't seeing in the same terminology as we see in the physical realm. Now, I was looking at her and I could see the energy coming off the back of her head where she was pulled through into the car by her hair. Now, it's like the heat coming off the road, where you see that heat coming off the road. It was like that. You could see this energy coming out the back of her head. I could see the blood down the side of her mouth where she'd been punched. So I could see that, but I couldn't taste anything. There was no taste there. There was no connection in that way. The really interesting part about it, and what really blew me away, is I had no emotional connection to that body. I knew I was connected to it, but there was no emotional connection. And I remember looking around thinking, is anyone going to help her? Is anyone around? And as I looked around, if you can imagine like a bright full moon night, that's what it looked like, because it was at night, but it was like a bright full moon night. Now, it wasn't a full moon that night, but it was like this beautiful blue glow that came through when I looked around. And again, because I didn't have this connection, like I wasn't really connected with what was going on down there, but I was absolutely mesmerised about what was going on, what I was looking at, and the feeling and everything that was coming through with it. But I looked down again, and you could see the energy coming out of different body parts where the bruising was starting to come through. You could see these areas of obviously pain, but it was energy. It was just energy coming out. And I looked at her, and I just sort of didn't have that connection with this body. I suppose I felt felt sorry for her, but I didn't. And it sounds really strange because in the real world, when somebody's being attacked, you have all that emotion, you have all that feeling, you have all that the want to help, the want to be there. I didn't have that. I just watched like you were watching a movie without the connection. And it was really strange to see. But I remember I did ask a question when I left the body. That was the main thing. How can I stop them doing this again? That was the question I asked that actually almost like sucked me out of that body. I needed to be away from the situation and away from that connection to get the answer I needed. Now, when I say this, I'm explaining it all and describing it all, but the reality was might have only been a couple of seconds. I don't know how long I was out of that body. I really don't. But I remember the feeling and I remember it really strongly. As I was out, I did get the message, what I needed to do. Now, once I got that message, I was straight back in that body. And I can assure you, you felt everything. And you felt it in such a big, powerful hit. It was it was very overwhelming. Everything came back all at once. And it was really overwhelming. But the message I got, I started to actually repeat the message. And I am not a religious person. I do not go to church. I don't follow any of the regular religions or organised religions. But I did go to Sunday school, I think 3 times when I was in primary school. And I must have remembered or picked up something from them because I remember coming back into the body and saying to them out loud, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do." And I don't know where I got that one from, but that's what I started to do. I started to forgive them. I said it out loud. I said it stronger and stronger until obviously they tried to stop me from talking. So I just kept on repeating it until the hand came over the mouth and around the throat. And then I passed out from there. But it was so strange to be out of this body and not smell the cigarettes and not taste the blood and not experience those things that you were experiencing in that physical realm. And like I said, Jeff, I got all this. I did talk a little bit about the attack, but I never ever talked about the experience I had with it because I didn't know what had happened. I didn't understand it. I did not get it just did not make sense. Trying to talk about this to you is easy compared to trying to talk about this to somebody else when you have no idea what you've just experienced. It just does not make any sense. But I've come back into the body. After I'd passed out, I came to in the side of the road, in a gutter on the side of the road, and headed back to the unit trying to find where I needed to go because I was on holiday, so I didn't know where I was. I went through all the stages that you do when you've been attacked, when you've had this sort of a trauma, but I still couldn't get an understanding of what this experience was that I had in between it. So that was my near death. That was my OBE, my first out-of-body experience.
Well, I would basically even classify that as a near-death experience.
Yeah, and look, I guess it could have been. There were certain things in it that why I don't class it as a near-death experience. And I didn't get that understanding, like I said, until 10 or 15 years later. So my next experience, and this is why I class this as a near-death, because I actually, okay, the two differences, you're making me think now. The two differences, that the OBE, why I call it an out-of-body experience, because I really did feel like I was still attached. I stood there and watched, if that made sense. I was there watching the body. My NDE, I completely left the body. Completely left it. Just did not feel like, I never even saw the body. You know how some NDEs, people look down and they see their body? I didn't even do that. So there was nothing like that. Yet in the OBE, I felt that there was. I felt like I was still attached. I have got a little bit of a theory about it, and I think sometimes when you hear about these young children that have been abused as children and they don't remember it, I've got a funny feeling they have been leaving their body, so they're not having to deal with the experience that they're dealing with. So that's just my little theory after, my understanding of it. But almost 12 months to the day of the attack, I was at work. I was in the bank. I worked in the bank. I was at work. I was the head teller. And we had our morning meeting. We hadn't opened shop yet, hadn't opened the bank. And I started feeling quite ill. And that there was no reason why there was nothing that I knew of. I just started feeling really sick. Like I was going to lose my stomach or I was going to lose my bowels or something. I just felt really ill and really quickly. I know one of the other staff members was trying to lead me to the office, to the staff room. And although the last thing I remember hearing was saying, she's too heavy, I can't hold her. So obviously I blacked out by then, and someone that helped get me into the staff room. What I didn't know that we had in the staff room is we had one of those, the banana lounges that fold out, those real low banana lounges. I think they're like day beds at a resort or something.
I'm not sure.
In Australia, we call
I think I kind of mean like you mean like a couch that can fold out into a bed?
But more of the plasticky ones, and they're like aluminium and woven, and they fold, the head folds out and the legs fold out.
Maybe we call those futons here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an outdoor piece of equipment, but anyway, in Australia we call them banana lounges, and you sunbake on them and stuff like that. So I didn't know we had one. It must have been folded up and put away. I didn't know we had one. But obviously they'd laid me on that, which again I was out then. And what I do remember in this is I remember standing up. I stood up, and everybody was looking down. They were looking down at me. And I stood up, and I remember saying, "Hey, I'm up here. Why are you looking down there?" And it was that made me realise that, something else is happening. And from there, I kept on travelling, north. For here in Australia, it's north, but we kept on travelling up, basically. So this is when I've had the near-death experience, because I was completely away from my body. So the area I was in, it wasn't horrific. Didn't have a heart attack. I didn't have any. All of a sudden, I felt sick, and I was out of it. There was a doctor's surgery right beside us, and he did eventually give me an adrenaline hit, which I didn't know, a needle, and then I came to. But what I experienced during that NDE, I didn't experience a tunnel. I didn't. Let me explain first. Again, I didn't know what had happened. I never spoke about it. I was just sick at work and I went home. That was all I ever said. Again, it wasn't until the 10, 15 years later. And 10, 15 years later was when I was going through my marriage breakdown, and I was reading a lot of books. And in those days, we didn't have internet, we didn't have podcasts or anything like that. So I read a lot of books. And I read a lot about, there was 3 areas in my life that was really important to me. One was self-help, one was self-development, one was finances, because I was so financially controlled in my relationship, I needed to learn how to take back some control. And the third one, which was just a passion, was spirituality. So I would go every week, not every week, every couple of weeks. So when I'd go into shopping, I'd go to the library and grab as many books as I could. And you were allowed to bring home 10 books in those days. So I'd bring home all the books. I'd slip through them, have a little look through them. If they resonated with me to start with, I'd hold on to them, I'd read them. If they didn't, I'd just put them aside, take them back to the library. So, it was very similar to listening to a podcast. You take on what you want, you listen to where you want to be, and then you let the rest of it go. So it's the same sort of principle, and that's what I was getting out of these books. And it was one particular book I read about near-death experiences. Now, this was a book that had about 6 cases in it. And they first started talking about NDEs, and there were 6 cases. And I remember reading them and that was my aha moment. That was when I realised what had happened, why I didn't talk about it and what it was all about. Now, in these experiences, they had different experiences. And one of them, there was a couple of them that saw a tunnel. I didn't see a tunnel. There was no tunnel for me, and yet I know that there was a path. So there wasn't anything like that happening. So there was little bits and pieces in some of them that was similar to mine. And that's when I went, oh, that's what I think I've had, this experience. Because otherwise I would have never ever spoken about it. So what my experience was like, all I remember was the standing up part. That bit was fine. I couldn't understand why they weren't looking at me. And then I was in this sort of space. And the hardest thing about talking about NDEs is trying to explain what it is and what you see, because I saw colour and I heard music, but I couldn't say it was the colour that we see down here. It was so vibrant and so different. Probably the closest one that really resonated with me was a green, and it was like a green of a bright light green, not as in light, dark light, not light as in, oh, you know what I mean. So the green was the closest one I could find as far as colours. But I was in this space and I was heading in a particular direction. Don't know why, I couldn't see the floor, knew I was on the right path, couldn't see a path, but knew you were going the right way. And I watched these sparkles. It all started becoming sparkly around me. And then there was dark spaces in these sparkles. And I started to really zoom in into the dark spaces, the dark colours, or the darker areas. Now, again, in those days, there was no such thing as a mobile phone. Now I can turn around and say it looked like a mobile phone, but they were like little miniature TV screens. And on them they were playing I could see my family, I could see different aspects of my vision of how I saw a situation, a memory. And I put them down as sort of memories as I walked through. As I'm going through, and you feel like you're walking for a long time, but I don't believe I was, but I felt like I was walking for a long time. Time was sort of very irrelevant. And I remember coming up to, in the distance, what looked like a wall, but it wasn't a wall, it was just shadow on the side there, and you knew that you were heading to the centre, to this almost like this opening of this wall. So I'm heading down there, and as I've got closer, now, Jeff, you asked me if I saw family or friends or anyone I knew. I didn't know anyone, but I knew that they were friends or family, or they felt like home. It was like kids peering around the corner and watching and looking. It was like these little figures that were coming around the side of this wall or this opening and giggling and laughing. And they felt like home. That's where I was meant to be. That's where I was. They didn't look like anything in particular, and they certainly felt loving and caring and kind, but there was not the clarity of anything like that. As I've got closer, because it was almost, like I said, I felt like you were going home. As I got closer, they talk about the booming voice, and I understand why they say a booming voice, because there's no other way to explain it. But when I've heard people say booming voice, to me, it's like you'd hear this, well, naturally booming voice, but it's not like that. It's the energy is like that, but the sound is not like that. So you've got that energy. You can feel it as a booming voice, as the energy of a booming voice, but it's not like it's loud and scary and, like overwhelming or anything else. It's just this energy of this booming voice that comes through. And I didn't even hear it like in a clear way, but it was just the feeling, the overwhelming feeling that it's, oh, you're not supposed to be here. But it was so nice. The music was nice. The whole feeling of it, like you've been away for years and years, and all of a sudden you've come back, and it's just beautiful. Without looking beautiful, it's just that feeling. Everything is all about the feeling, that energy, that emotion that's going through. Not emotion, it's the feeling that's going through. But in hearing that sort of for want of another word, that booming voice, it was like straight away I was back on this banana lounge, back on this bed, and I'd come to. So I'd lost my bladder. I'd, had an adrenaline shot from the doctor, and then he'd gone, and I sort of came to from there. So again, I sort of question things. I question it all because I'm a theory tester to start with, and I question that. Did I have a near-death experience? I wasn't on an operating table where people have passed. You know, they've had that acknowledgement that yes, you did die on the operating table. I didn't have any of that. I don't have that proof. And so it's really hard to sort of put things forward when you really don't know what's going on. So again, I never said anything. I didn't understand it until I read a bit about it. And then I got a bit more of an understanding of what had happened in the attack as well. And that started to make more sense. And it wasn't until about, say, 20 odd years after the attack and this experience that I actually started talking about them, because I didn't want to just talk for the sake of talking. I wanted to talk for the sake of learning. I like to teach people. I like to get an understanding of it. Any of the books that I read, and I can tell you, I read a lot at that time during that marriage breakup and things like that. I tested a lot of those theories. One of the other theories I tested manifestation, came back with $85,000 after 6 months, so that worked well. But one of the other theories I wanted to test was astral traveling, which is similar to OBEs. You're leaving your body as well, and your spirit is traveling. So that was another one I wanted to test. And it took about 6 months, and I tested that and did it. So we can leave our bodies. We have that option. We can leave them. And I feel it's this safety mechanism. It's this way of our spirit looking after ourselves in some ways, where we take it away from what it is. And I don't know where I was going on that. I'd lost track, but that was my third experience about leaving the body.
Susan, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. If we go back to your first experience, you were verbally telling them something like, "Forgive them, Lord, for they do not know what they're doing."
Yeah.
Did you personally forgive them?
Oh, wow, that is a really good question. I don't feel like I did at the time. Honestly don't feel like I did at the time, because to me it made no sense. Why would you be forgiving somebody that is doing what they're doing to you? And it was a pretty violent attack. So logically, no, like that's not making sense. But I said it over and over and over again. And I have to be honest in the fact that I know I went through some stuff after it, like after being attacked, and I still hold on to certain things, like having a car come up behind me slowly. It still brings a little bit of a shiver down my back. And I'm living in the space where the attack happened. So I actually moved home and have travelled around Australia a bit, but I'm living on the Gold Coast where the actual attack happened. So there's a lot of areas there. But I honestly think I did forgive them, and I don't quite understand how I did that or why I did that, but I didn't want to hold on to anything in an energetic sort of a form. I did not want to hold on to that negative stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I never talked about it. I didn't want to spread the negative energy around any further. And the only, I remember saying to myself, the only way I'll talk about this is if I can find a positive slant on it. And the only positive slant I found was that I had that experience within it. And the area I go with that, and because I talk about those 3 experiences that I had, and that was all about understanding that we have this spiritual side to us and the physical side to us. So if we have a spiritual body and a physical body, and they're not really connected emotionally, after that first experience, they're not really connected in ways that we expect them to be connected. My question always was, well, how do they communicate? And that's why I teach about intuition. That's why I try to get everyone to trust their intuition, to follow their gut, to really trust themselves more than trusting the rest of the world. And that is why I talk about it now, is because I believe I did forgive them. I believe I did. I don't quite know how. I hope I have. Yes, I have. I definitely have. It may have taken a while, but I have.
Well, I think that message could be interpreted in two ways, one for them and potentially for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I didn't. And I haven't looked at it that way, Jeff. Yeah. One of the things that I have a strong feeling at, of the three of them now, I believe that two definitely didn't go on and do it again. The third one, the most violent one, I believe he would have, could have, may have, or be in jail or something to that effect. But I feel like 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I sort of, I don't want to say saved, but I think I may have stopped 2 of them doing it.
I know you said you weren't a religious person, but that or the other experience change you in any sort of spiritual way?
Oh, totally. In a spiritual way, yes. Yeah, 100%. So those two things happened young in my life. So when my marriage and everything else was starting to fall down and things weren't going as planned, religion, I didn't turn to religion, but I did turn to spirituality. And I call it that way because it's not as organized. It's not as structured. It's not you do this and you get that result. With spirituality, it's more about, okay, you basically got to trust your gut, go with what you want to go with, you go with what feels right for you, and you grow and you develop that way. So yes, I've always been spiritually minded anyway, but it did make me want to go further and further that way. The physical body wasn't all we had. And I have been in circles where all they talk about is spirituality, and sometimes they just get too airy fairy. They just get too, too not grounded enough. And I feel that we've got to have the balance between the two. We have to be physically supportive in ourselves, and we have to be spiritually supportive in that side. If you do that through religion, that's great. That's fine. I don't like it because I don't like the rules and regulations that go with it.
Do you remember what the music sounded like on the other side?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I do. And it's going to sound so cliche when you sort of say like handpipes and stuff like that. It sounds so cliche, but that's the closest you can get to it because it isn't the same as, how can I explain it? We have white noise in here, where we have the buzz of the computer and we have the roads going by. We have a lot of that white noise that they call white noise, I think. If you can imagine, it's like the music, but it's white noise music. So it's there and you know it's there and you hear it there, but you don't hear it there. And it's more like the energy of the music rather than the music itself. So I remember once I went to watch my daughter and she was doing the violin. And we went to an orchestra, went to a show. It was the first time I'd been to, see a big orchestra. And one of the things that really got to me when I was listening, it wasn't the music that they were playing, it was the vibration that was going through you. Now, I can hear beautiful music on, why we love the doof doof music, because you've got that beat, that's that energy going through you. With this orchestra, you have that energy going through and it vibrates all through your body. And I really felt it in the heart chakra area. And this is sort of the type of music that was there. I can't say it's a particular sound or anything else, but that vibration that comes through you, you feel it and it's really uplifting. It's really, and the closest thing you can get to is like the panpipes or that sort of music where it lifts you. I know it's not explaining it properly, but it's as close as I can get.
If you compared your second experience to a dream, would you say it's completely different?
Oh, yeah, yeah. A dream can jump all over the place. This didn't jump. Sometimes dreams don't, obviously, but this was very, very, very logical in its stepping. So whereas dreams can be quite irrational and erratic, it felt different. I felt like I was on purpose. I felt like it. this is just your natural purpose, your natural progression. It felt right. It didn't feel disjointed. It didn't feel strange. It didn't feel like I was living it. It felt like I was it. There is a difference. When I did the astral traveling, when I practiced and eventually did it. Now, I know a lot of people do astral traveling all the time. But when I practiced that and I started doing it, it felt so different to what a dream would or anything else would. So, yes, there was a really strong distinction between that. But when you don't know, I mean, I can say that now. Look, like 20, 30 years later, I can say that now. But at the time, I had no idea. I had no idea what had happened, but it felt real. It just felt real. Yeah.
There was some sort of voice that basically let you know that you weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Whose voice do you think that was?
Look, the only thing I can say is God, because I don't know anything else. I don't know any other stuff. I tend to I went with anti-God for a little while in my life because it didn't feel right. And so I started to look at, universal source, universal information, and I went through all the different words and everything else to try and get over that understanding of what God is. You hear of so many bad things happening in the name of God, and you hear so many, things like that, being blamed, God being blamed. So I didn't like to associate with God in any way that anyone else was associating. So universal energy was beautiful for me because it was a nobody, if that made sense. But I have to be honest, when I was in that space, that's all I could put it down to. And even with the attack, when I left the body, the information that I got was similar, not as booming. It was more of so it was a bit different. It was more of a direct knowing, that's what you've got to do. So it was like someone had just pumped that information into me. That's what you've got to do, back in the body. And I just did it automatically. Just started, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Louder and louder and louder. So, yeah, I have to say, God, I don't know. I don't know what else there is.
After either one of your experiences, did you notice that you had any new abilities that could be considered psychic?
I didn't notice that I had any new abilities. I have had abilities before that, but was not aware of it. Okay, so, things happen and you get that I couldn't call myself psychic beforehand because that didn't resonate with me anyway. A long time after it, I felt more intuitive, and I call it intuitive, and I'm getting messages from my soul and that side of it. So I look at it in that context. I was always that way. I think it was being able to say it. Once I started reading these books and I went, that's what happened, or this, that sounds similar to what had happened to me. It gave me a bit more of an understanding of it. So was there a big switch, a big aha moment? Absolutely not. Not for me. No. Wish there was, but there wasn't. And it was more of my situation for me. It was more about reflection. So I'd got to this stage in my life where I knew life had to change. There had to be some differences. There had to be some things made, some choices made. And it was then that I started to reflect back to try and get an understanding of where I didn't want to repeat the same problems and all the rest. So I had to start to reflect, to get back, get an understanding of who I was, what these things had happened, how to deal with them, why I was in such a disgusting relationship, how to go forward with all that sort of stuff. And that's when I started to realise I had this intuitive ability. But friends had said before, no, you've always been like that. I never saw it. Like most of the times with psychics and things like that, you're getting information, you just don't really know if it's true or not, and you don't know where to take it until you do get some sort of clarification on it. So did I have a switch, a big aha moment? No. Did I look at life a little bit differently? Yes, I did. I started to look at things a little bit differently and made some changes in my life that have now become part of me, part of who I am.
You mentioned earlier that you learned how to leave your body. Do you still do that regularly?
No, I'm a I'm a theory tester. I like to test the theory, and then I tend to sort of move on. It's not something. I think it was a lesson I needed to understand. So I feel like my life is on purpose now, and these were the lessons that I needed to learn and understand. I had read Eckhart Tolle. I'd read a few of the other books, and they talk about the two bodies, the physical and the spiritual. And yes, I believed it. But did I believe it deep down? Was I really aware of it? And being a theory tester, I needed to test the theory to get the understanding. And that's why I did the astral traveling. It was like, well, if we have two bodies, if we can do that, I want to get an understanding of what it feels like to have the two bodies. I know what it feels like to have a physical body because, I get hurt and all the rest of it, and I feel the bruises and all the rest. So I get the physical side of it. I want to understand the spiritual side of it. And one of the ways I could test that is through the astral traveling. And that's why I practiced and practiced and practiced that until I got it. Now, I can tell you right now, I lasted probably all of 1.5 seconds, I reckon. It was really short, really sweet, but I felt it and I understood what it was because it felt so different. The thing was, as soon as I realised I was astral traveling, I got so excited, straight back in my body. The emotions with it doesn't always work. We've got to be a little bit more bland in that side of things. So it did give me the understanding, the real clear understanding that we have these two areas. And maybe I'm one of those people that have a bit of faith, but not a lot until I've tested it. So do I need to test that? No, I know it's there now. I feel comfortable with that. I get the understanding of it. So I don't do that. I did the manifestation. I tested that, and that worked. That worked a charm. Do I do it? Well, probably not as good as I should do. Not as good as I did do, but I don't feel I need to do it in that sort of context anymore. It was heavy duty, not heavy duty. It was very focused concentration on one thing. I don't want to be concentrating on one thing in my life. I want to enjoy the whole of my experiences, not just one or two things. So I probably don't focus on that, but I do focus on making sure we're looking at things positively, promoting a positive future for myself and different things like that. So yes, there's been changes, but not over a longer period of time.
What would you say your purpose is here?
Well, I believe I'm a bit of a teacher. I don't know why, because I've never done teaching, but I feel like I have got a lot of information through my experiences to be able to share. My biggest thing is one of the things I look at with psychics and clairvoyants and things like that, I watch people come in to get readings and they come in constantly. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And they're constantly seeking advice from everything else. What do the stars say today? And what is this happening? And we'll go to church and we'll see what the prophets say and what's happening here. And everybody is giving their energy to everything else instead of bringing it back to themselves. And my goal, being on purpose for me, is about teaching people to start to trust their intuition, to trust their feelings, to trust if it doesn't feel right, then there's something not right, and go with that. It doesn't mean what you're thinking. Let me give you an example. If say you feel like your partner is cheating on you, you feel that there's something going on, there's something sneaky going on, right? Trust the gut in the fact that there's something going on. Not necessarily that they're cheating on you, not necessarily that they're hiding something from you, but that there is something going on. Now, there's something going on could be that they're not well. There's something going on, could be they're hiding the engagement ring they want to send you, give to you the next week. What happens is we get these feelings and then we take it off in our own head and we go the wrong direction. So we might get the feeling, and the difference between emotions and feelings, emotions are energy in motion, feelings are what we're actually feeling. So we could be feeling sad, could be feeling down, but we might put the energy out of rage or anger or different things like that. So emotions and feelings can be completely different. So when you're getting this feeling that there's something not quite right, don't put it in your head of what it could be. Just sit with that. It doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't feel quite right. When you sit with that for a while, week, 2 weeks, whatever it takes, you will start to get the right reasons as to why it doesn't feel right, not how you're thinking it doesn't feel right.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Absolutely, 100%.
What's the best way to contact you?
Through my website, which is intuitivenature.com.au, and it's Australian business, or on the socials, on all the socials, I'm on there, Susan Jane, life coach, or the art of intuition is the other thing. So I do like creative channeling as well. So I don't do it. I make my guests do it. So they channel in what their goals are, what they want to achieve, and we paint it and then do a reading on it. So we do this sort of creative channeling. So the art of intuition is another area you can get me.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Oh, well, there's a little free quiz on my website if you want to do that. There's a little free quiz. It's all about your intuitive nature. So it's how you're receiving your messages. So when Spirit's giving you a message or your soul's giving you messages, how do you receive them? Are you getting them physically? Like is there physical signs that we see? When I was doing a lot of healing, my hands would go very blotchy, and I couldn't understand why. Somebody said, "Oh, you need to go and see a doctor about that." I couldn't understand why they would get blotchy. And then it started to link that I was needing to do some healing, and there would be people around me that needed some work done on them, and that's when it would go blotchy. So that was a physical sign that I was getting. And we get mental signs, we get thought patterns, we get emotional signs, and we get the spiritual sign. And the spiritual sign can be all sorts of strange and different ways. One of the things I do talk about is like we were driving down the main highway on the Gold Coast, the M1. I'm driving down there with my partner, and we'd been talking about something, and he said, "Oh my goodness, did you see that billboard? It had exactly what we were talking about on it." And I went, "No, I didn't see that." Driving on a little bit more, and the guy on the radio started talking about it, and I said to him, "Hey, did you hear that? The guy's talking about it as well." And he goes, "No, I didn't hear it." Now we're in the same car going down the same road. He sees the billboard because visually that's where he's stronger. I hear the radio because that's where I'm stronger at. So we pick up those intuitive messages those different ways. And this little quiz will help you decide, or will help you work out how you pick those information, how you pick up your information the strongest.
Do you have any other tips for us to develop and trust our intuition?
Oh, absolutely. One of them is like kinesiology. So where you can stand up. I was going to show you, but all you'll see is my belly if I do that. So you can stand up and you get yourself balanced, and you sort of say to yourself, just have a couple of deep breaths and have a think about it. And you can say to yourself, just define, what does yes mean? And you will find your body will go one way or another. It will either start to move forward or start to move backwards. Majority of times, yes, your body will start to naturally move forward. And then you say, well, define no for me, and that your body will naturally, majority of times, go backwards. So all of a sudden you've got an understanding now. You've got this little temperature where you're going forward or backwards. So then you can ask a question, and you go and get centered, get comfortable, get standing there nice and balanced, and then ask your question. Whatever your question is, should I have a cup of coffee now? And allow your body to either go to take its whichever way you want it to go, not whichever way you want to go, whichever way it chooses to go. So your soul, your spirit can tweak micro muscles, little muscles, to help you go forward and backwards, or when you're holding a pendulum to help that move. It can't force you to take a step to the left or take a step to the right. It can put in your head, give you that understanding to step to the left or step to the right. But these little micro muscles, it can actually help move. So when you're standing there and you're relaxed and everything else, you can lean forward. You may go forward or you may go backwards if you're going to have a cup of coffee or not, if it's good for you. The biggest thing about it and the hardest part is making sure you ask the right questions. No such thing as the right questions, you say. It's how it's worded. So I know one lady said, she was pregnant, am I going to have a boy? And it went, yes. And then she said, well, am I going to have a girl? And she went, yeah. And it went, yes. What she didn't define, she didn't have twins, but what she didn't define is this pregnancy going to be a boy or is this pregnancy going to be a girl? So yes, she ended up having a boy and a girl. So there's a lot of ways we can ask those questions, and that's probably the hardest thing, is because the question could be interpreted so many different ways. So make them really clear that you can only possibly give a yes/no answer to, and you will get your yes/no answers.
Susan, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Your intuition is never wrong. It's how we interpret those messages that can make it appear wrong. Okay. Just like I said with those questions, am I having a baby boy? Yes, you are, but not with this pregnancy. So it's how we interpret those questions. I'm feeling that my partner is doing something sneaky, or he's holding back on me, or she's holding back on me. Don't interpret those questions that, yes, that's happening, but don't interpret them and start putting all sorts of crap into your head, because that's not where you need to go. Your intuition will always give you positive aspects. It would very rarely give you a negative one. Majority of times, if you are in danger and your intuition is stepping in, or your soul stepping in, it will take you a different direction, not say, oh, there's bad stuff happening this way, don't go that way. It will tend to go, hey, go this way instead. You will always go towards the positive. So my positive to take away is, stay positive as much as you can. And there's always, even after a pack rate, there's always a silver lining. Look for that.
Susan, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me on here, Jeff. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.